So, very good afternoon, everyone. This morning we had an interesting tour through France, Italy, Portugal, Slovenia, the UK. Giovanna sends her thanks and regards from Napoli. And we heard some interesting, very different perspectives on emergency law in various categories of emergency law. And this afternoon, we want to focus on Israel. And the occasion, basically, of this gathering is a draft bill that was publicized very recently, called Preparedness of the Homefront for the state of emergency. This is the first comprehensive bill which actually sets various measures, various competences, various powers and institutions to deal with generic emergency. And we want to talk a little bit about this bill and get some of your very wise remarks from around the world. We will start with a presentation of Batya and Eran that will portray the main issues dealt with in the bill in comparative perspective, and this is based on research that we commissioned them to do. And we will continue with Meir and Eran, who will talk about constitutionalization of emergency powers. And then we'll have a presentation of the main features of the bill by one of its drafters, and then we'll open up for a general discussion. Okay. So, Batya, Eran, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. So here we are in 2017, and we actually don't have a law in Israel, one comprehensive law that regulates the management of emergency situations. I must say, in the morning, I see most everybody was talking about emergency in the sense of terrorism and mass migration, etc. And actually, the focus on the bill of the Israeli law is on disasters. In order to understand, I'd like to just give a brief introduction of brief history of the Israel legislation in order to understand where we are today. Israel got independence in 1948. The first prime minister was David Ben-Gurion, and he actually, as it says here, this is one of his quotes, it's famous, he saw the whole country as a front line, the whole people are in the army. And this is actually what guided him in 1951 when the first civil defense law was formed in Israel. The first civil defense law actually said that there's an officer who is like the CEO, but it didn't say that it is part of the army. They integrated in the law, there were volunteers, volunteer groups, there were people, citizens that had to, in time of it, actually they were talking about time of war, they have to come and help out on to help whatever is going on. But this was the general meaning. What happened was, though, that the civil defense became a part of the army, and the final stamp was after the first Gulf War in 1991. And the Homefront Command was established in 1992 following the war. And it was following, as we can see, it became a major, we saw a shift from the border front to the home front. There was a change in the whole concept of the civil defense. Before we know the traditional wars were on borders with the tanks and whatever it is. Now we had missiles being shot at the civilian population, which we still see now from Gaza, as even last week, as we know, 16 rockets were shot into Israel. And so this made actually a different concept. And so the Homefront Command was established in the army itself. The head of the Homefront Command is a general. And the law was changed, the civil law. And in the civil defense law, not just the head of the civil defense got certain authorities, but also other, like the chief of staff and other high officers and the Minister of Defense. So now we already see a shift, and it became a part of the army, which as I say that there's it's a bit of a dilemma in Israel, because on one hand you have the army was very efficient, but on the other hand you have the soldiers who are have direct contact with the civilian population, and then giving them orders, and they actually come into the municipalities, and they kind of forget that they're part of the army. They think that they can rule the country during these times of crisis. So this went on, and then the next change actually was the Second Lebanon War in 2006. And as it says, you can see here about 4,000 missiles were launched into Israel, to Hadera, which is south of Haifa. And there were 49 civilian fatalities and many wounded. And following this, the state controllers said that they recognized that there was a problem, that there is no one authority that manages disaster situations. And they recommended a national body be made, And this was actually in 2007, following the Second Lebanon War. The National Emergency Management Authority was established, NEMA, and it was done through a government situation. And we're 10 years later, and there still is no, the government decision, there still is no law governing this, the NEMA. So there have been several attempts to make a law, but up until now, it hasn't been successful. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to actually do a comparative study of what happens in different countries around the world and see how legislation in different countries deals with disaster management. And you can see that basically, again, we're coming to at the beginning of the day, we're talking about, the before, during, after, but actually I think this is what we had meant, because you have the preparedness and the mitigation stage, and then you have the response if the disaster actually happens, and then you have the recovery stage, which also includes the rehabilitation. So here are just some examples. Obviously, we aren't going to bring you the whole study. We haven't finished the whole study, but just to get an idea of different attitudes, different models that we see in legislation around the world. So if we look at the 3 different stages, we can ask which legislation, which laws, in which countries did they actually refer to all the stages in the main law. So in Israel, you all have a copy of the bill there. If you notice, actually, it talks about the stage 1, and it talks about the stage 2, but actually stage 3, the recovery stage, there's really nothing discussed in the law itself. In Japan, the Japan law is the Disaster Countermeasures Basic Act of 1997. It's a very detailed law, and it has all the stages. Then in Canada, well, it's a different system there. You have the national, and then you have the provinces. So we actually looked at the national level. You have a Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness in stage 1, but it doesn't actually go into any detail beyond that. But once we took, for instance, there's the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act from 1990, and it actually goes into stage 1 and stage 2. Then we looked at the Philippines. There's a Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act. It's a very, at least on the paper, I don't know what happens, per se, but it's it looks like a very good law. It's from 2010, and it has all 3 stages. Then we looked to see, you have different central authorities that were established in these laws. We wanted to see actually which minister, which is in charge of the central authority. So in Israel, as you can guess, it's the Ministry of Defense, and there was an attempt to make a separate office at one point. I think that you'll also discuss this, other people discuss it, and it lasted, I think, for about a year, and then it came back to the Ministry of Defense. I won't go into all of the reasons behind it. Maybe, I think, other speakers will talk about this. In Japan, it's the chairman of the council, the Central Disaster Prevention Council. It's actually the Prime Minister. You also see that in India. India, it's, I think, if I would give grades, I'd say India is one of the best laws. Is made. I don't actually know how it's done, even if you can see here. If in Japan they talk of the chairman of the council, in India even they said the chairperson. You know? It's a very advanced law. In New Zealand, it actually was interesting because they left it open. It said just a minister appointed by the prime minister, and actually de facto they made a Ministry of Civil Defense in the emergency. In the UK, you have the Civil Contingencies Committee, and he's under the Home Secretary. And then you have in the Philippines, again, you have the Secretary of the Department of National Defense. So what we wanted to show you was just different models in different countries of who actually, which ministries are in charge of the central authority.
Sorry, just one question. Could you please explain a little bit more, because I'm not sure if I got it right. What do you mean by in charge of? Is it in charge of the legislation?
In the law, if you have a law, okay, you have the law, and so the law says, for instance, even in Israel, if you look at the what it says here, you have the National Emergency Management Authority, and it's in the office. It's in the office of the Minister of Defense, and he gives the, you know, basically has the ministerial authority over.
Sort of an institutional affiliation of the subject.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. For instance, I mean, just to put it in the easiest way, now you have NEMA. You have also, we have Mayan, who is the legal advisor to the NEMA, and actually she's you know, she works for the Ministry of Defense. You know.
Clarify that by we mentioned the central authority because that's the main pivot for dealing with all the three stages.
Okay, and then the next thing that we wanted to actually compare with the different laws of different countries is how, again, if they relate to different elements during the three stages. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing here because I think we're kind of short in time. But as you can see, the first stage, as we said, is the preparedness and mitigation. And if you compare, you can see that all of them, all of the laws that we looked at had a requirement to make an emergency plan, a national plan. All of them spoke about a national plan. Some of them didn't go down and have in detail in the plan all of the different entities that are part of it. For instance, if you look about with the NGOs, in most of the countries, the national plan doesn't talk about the NGOs or volunteer groups, but we did see it in India and the Philippines, that they actually say to have them be involved in the preparedness and mitigation at the first level, at the level of preparedness. We looked also, we want to go and see whether there's a central budget. We didn't see anything in the UK actually about the budget. At the stage 2 response, the first thing that we wanted to actually see is whether the law said there has to be a declaration of an emergency situation in order to authorize the different responders to, you know, start getting into action. And so we did see that, well, in Israel, Japan, Philippines, and Ontario, there has to be emergency declaration. In India, it doesn't say that there is actually a declaration. What was interesting that sometimes you see that it doesn't actually say that there's a declaration of an emergency, but it'll say things like the local government or a town council or whoever, they see that there is a situation of an emergency, and then they contact, usually if it's at the lower level, the local and the municipal level, they have to contact the central government or the province, whatever it is, and to get them involved.
One other question. That means just that I can understand it. When, for example, here in Haifa there are refinery burns, that would require the central government to declare an emergency.
Yes, and that's actually what I didn't say before in my introduction is that there's actually a separate law in Israel, the police ordinance. The police ordinance says that the government can, actually it's not the government first, it's either the Minister of Internal Security, Homeland Security, the head of the police, above the police, he can declare that there is a state of a major disaster. So that's what he would do. It would be at the central level. It would never be done at the level of the city. And if it has to do with a disaster that is actually has to do with something, you know, in an army facility, would be by the Minister of Defense. And okay, was actually interesting just to see that many of them talk about the power of the central authority to take over during an emergency. There's laws, for instance, if I'm not mistaken, it was in Japan, and it says that during an emergency, the central government can actually run a town instead of the mayor itself. You know, they actually go in and they take over. They, you know, run the municipality at a lower level. We also looked to see whether these laws talked about emergency regulations, and we could see that they do. Also in Israel, because we do have laws, you know, wouldn't be right to say we don't have a law, because we have many laws, and we have other laws that give the different authorities the power to use emergency regulations, but it even you know, even though we don't have that law, we have other laws that certainly empower them. We asked about using private resources, and Israel doesn't say anything about using private resources, and in Ontario and the other countries it does. Again, the question of NGOs, we don't have anything during the response stage of NGOs in Israel or in Ontario. You see it in other countries, Japan, Philippines, yeah. During recovery, as we said, that actually Israel, the law doesn't deal with the stage of recovery at all. It's interesting to see the financial means of coping with recovery. It was mentioned before, sometimes there's countries that actually, for instance, India, that they give compensation to citizens that are that have been affected by a major disaster. Sometimes you have different countries that also talk about different funds, relief funds and rehabilitation funds, but we don't have any of this in Israel. Okay, this is just a list of the different laws that we base this on.
Property tax. Property tax.
What?
That is for recovery. It's not a development.
But that's, I was asked about the property tax. property tax just has to do with wartime situations, and it doesn't have to do with natural disasters. This is the problem in Israel. It's a, yeah, Mas Rehush. No, it's not in this law, it's in a separate law. But again, it only has to do with wartime, and also, yeah, just wartime. Hostilities.
Emergency.
No, you don't need a declaration of war for this. We don't, usually. Israel is in a state of emergency since 1948.
Thank you, Batya, for this introduction. Mail, your turn.
Thank you very much for having me here. Necessary. So what's the problem here? Israel has been under severe security challenges for since the introduction of the first practicing Zionists to this country back in the modern 19th century. They have not been accepted by the local people ever since, who practically reject their presence here and their growth here, used a variety of means in order to express their uneasiness about this situation, using different kinds of means. One of the more prevalent ones was we would now term as terrorism. Okay, so we have had this problem continuously throughout the generations, and of course, to a larger extent, since the establishment of the State of Israel 70 years ago, again, more severely, continuously, but more severely after the occupation of the territories inhabited mostly by the Palestinians, and the most severe challenge, of course, was during the second Intifada, 2004, in which more than 1,000 people were killed by different kinds of terrorist activities, which is approximately 1/3. With 4 years, we had about 1/3 of the total fatalities from terrorist activities in these 4 years, 1/3 of the total in 120 years. Matter of fact, the second largest wave of terrorist attacks was in the first year, the War of Independence, before the Arab countries with the military establishments have invaded Israel after the establishment of the state. Okay? That was a major disruption of the state, not only in terms of the damage to the fatalities, but mostly because of the total disruption of the routine of the different kinds of functionalities. Since then, we had another form of terror activities against the state of Israel, mostly manifested by the high trajectory weapon system, mortars, rockets, and missiles that were launched against Israel in different instances. One from 2006, the Second Lebanon War, Hezbollah, and then 3 consecutive campaigns or rounds of hostilities in Gaza, from Hamas, again when different kinds of high trajectory weapons known to civilian populations. I think that it is important for us to understand that basically we have here two different kinds of the same phenomenon of terrorism. For me, it doesn't make much difference if the disruption is aimed by explosives to demoralize and bring chaos and fear to the civilian population. They're manifested by suicide bombers with the explosive vests, or by a rocket. Basically, it's different means for the same notion. I think that both of them are terrorists. So this has become a very serious kind of a challenge to the state of Israel throughout the years, but mostly, unfortunately, in the last, let's say, 15 years or 16. So it's a problem. Then again, when we talk about disruptions, this is the word I use for emergencies or for disasters, God forbid. So disruptions is the word I use. Major disruptions, we have to think also to remember that the most serious disruption is still awaiting us. It's nothing to do with terrorism. It's mostly natural based, forthcoming, expected, for sure. Next, earthquake that will be coming to the state of Israel hopefully later than the next day. Because every 1 century, roughly, here this Holy Land is being disrupted by a major earthquake. Now, there are different kinds of calculations as to the severity of the consequences of this event. But if we base ourselves on the last one that happened here in 1927, July of 1927, take the same magnitude and we translate the expectation of the forecast for casualties, the updated official numbers speak about 200% compared with the total losses from terrorist activities in the last 120 years. Okay? Quite serious. Hopefully not less than that, perhaps more. Nobody knows. So we have two problems. One is the natural disruption. The other one is the man-made disruption. So how are we doing with regard to responding to those two challenges? So I say not too good. People who are responsible for the emergency management in Israel say medium plus or medium minus. Okay? Some also say we should look at the half full or half empty glass. In other words, we're not too great in our response capacity. The challenges that we know are coming. Not to speak about challenges that we do not think are going to come. Those are usually the more serious ones, the unexpected challenges. So if we are doing medium or mediocre or average to the known and expected threats, how are we doing with regard to the unknown threats? Not too good. So there are a variety of reasons why we are in such an unfavorable position in this very critical issue, which, by the way, security-wise, is the most serious security problem of the state of Israel. Especially now that the Iranians have been receding a little bit. So, we still have about, nobody knows, 10 years of a pause. Okay? With the terrorists, with Hamas, it can happen today. Okay? We are that close to another campaign or round, which will hit, most of the populated areas in Israel. Are we ready for that eventuality? Not too good. I would say not good enough. And I would also say something else to you. There is a very, very thorough study, forecast, that has been conducted by Ministry of Defense, brought to the government some months ago by NEMA. People? Hello? So NEMA, the National Emergency Management Authority, that has been mentioned here before, incorporated a very thorough study about the future cost, future disasters or disruptions, came up with a very serious kind of a work. They presented to the government July of last year. The government said, approved. Let me tell you that if we are sort of medium kind of prepared for the previous eventualities, since the new eventuality, the new focus, or the new scenario is about 8 times more serious. 8 times more serious quantitatively than the present forecast that we have. And this is not my prediction. I just go with the flow. So if we are so and so in terms of our preparedness to the previous scenario, we are probably less prepared for the future scenario. So the situation calls for our attention, doesn't it? So if you ask me why is Israel not good, 80%, let's say, okay, prepared for the future eventuality. There are different kinds of reasons for that. I'm not going to bore you with the entire analysis. I would just want to tell you what, to me, is the most serious problem. Hinders the capacity of this country to enhance its preparedness for the forecasted, formulated, and approved by the government future scenarios, both of terrorism, different kinds, and of the earthquakes. We're not talking about visions of thoughts of different people. We're talking about the official Israeli account. So why are we not treating them? As I said, I think this is my interpretation. I think there is one major reason that if it is addressed properly, it will change the entire picture dramatically. And this is the issue of responsibility and accountability. In Israel, we do not have, as of now, anybody, any organization that has the national responsibility and is not accountable for the preparedness, the management of, and dealing with the consequences of a major disruption. Not one. So, my suggestion to this distinguished forum is that if we change the situation, and there is a normative basis or a legislation to decide, that will decide, that there is an organ, a body, a group of people, a person, whatever, that would sort of be responsible for the formulation of the policy, for the development of the guidelines, and for the management of this whole business. It's a very serious kind of a business. It's very serious, very complicated. We changed the whole situation dramatically. I want just to give you an example of what I'm talking about. We have in Israel basically 2 fronts to deal with. We have the military front, which deals with the tanks, with the Navy, with the Air Force, etc., which deals with all the issues of the military. This is the military. This front is being organized carefully, meticulously, by a basic law of this country. is the government, there is the cabinet, there is the Minister of Defense, there is the Chief of Staff, and everything is hierarchically, ordinarily organized. It doesn't mean that everything is working beautifully, of course, but it is a system, it's a working system. Okay? I would suggest to you two things. Number one, the civilian front in Israel, which is much more complicated than the military one, no hierarchy, with people like you, like me, like our kids. Those are the players. We're not talking about soldiers and officers and technicians. We're talking about ordinary people. Okay? Very complicated and challenging kind of a system. It's not formulated. It's not structured. It's chaotic. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work enough. So, if there is a law that will organize this whole system, or at least give it a direction, okay, I think it will be a dramatic shift for the better. That's why I have been trying to suggest for years, in particular since 2006, when we were shocked by the performance of the civilian front in Israel because of the minor challenge of Hezbollah at the time. More than 1/3 of the country has been in total chaos and demoralization. 1/3 of the people of the northern part of Israel left their homes because they didn't have any reason to stay there under the rocket fire. It was quite a shock. So, good people came up with an idea, not because I said, I agree with them. It's time for us to organize the system legally, to have a normative basis. 10 years have elapsed. At least 5 different drafts have been carefully drafted by lawyers. Some of the drafts have reached the parliament and lost their way there. There is another one that was, this one here, has been drafted last year. I pray that it will find its way to the committees. It will probably not pass because of a variety of reasons. There are many reasons why this is the case, why we do not have this law. None of them has to do with the necessity of it. I want to venture into one guess of mine. It's not a total guess. It's an educated guess, if you wish, based on many interviews and discussions I had with very senior participants in the process in the last 11 years, since the first attempt. The law has not been forwarded to fruition because nobody in Israel wants to be responsible and mostly accountable for this issue. Okay? It's a mess. It's a messy issue. It will be messier. Okay? So, those who are in a position to decide, that is, the government on one hand, and the legislators, especially within a system of a coalition. This is our system. And this is great stuff. Would you prepare another draft, please? Okay. And that's what's happened. Draft after draft. Now this one. Has been drafted recently. By the way, each the person who is in charge of NEMA. What is it? The head. It's Tiger, who is the head of NEMA. happens to be a very good friend of mine and an extremely capable person. Extremely. He is a doer. And he understands exactly what has to be done. Not only in terms of this paper. He exactly knows what has to be done in terms of whatever is within his responsibility. He said, I want to pass the bill. This is one of his missions. That's not me to say. He said that. One of his goals, come up with the bill and to pass it in legislation. So he asked the honorable people here to prepare a draft. I don't know whether this draft has been prepared by or passed the legal counsels of the Minister of Defense. I don't know. Of course. Okay. I think it's an issue. It's a problem. It's a challenge. And I really hope that I'm wrong, that this draft, or perhaps an improved version of this draft, will pass. Because for me, it's more important that we are going to have a bill, we're going to have a law for the Homefront, than to get into the particularities of the law. Okay? The most important thing is to have a law. Because we need somebody who is responsible and accountable, which we don't have now. Okay? I think that any situation, or ordinary situation, a structured situation, is my understanding. I open it, of course, to you, as chairperson of this session for discussion. I'm wrong. I think that it's better to have a law, even if I have some dozens of remarks about the nature of the law, about the formulation of the different articles. To me, it's less important. And I have been talking with legislators about that. They're not interested. It's not an issue. Bring them something about supermarkets. Okay? Okay? They're not interested. Because they don't understand. And you know why they don't understand? What the situation really is? Because nobody tells them what the situation really is. They don't know. People in Israel don't know. But I said to you today about the 8 times over kind of a risk that we have, not because I say it, because the formal scenario that has been adopted by the government says so. Okay? But the government has decided not to make it public to the overall. So the members of Knesset, they don't know about it. They don't know about it. Not because it's a secret, but because the government decided it's better for the people not to know. To live it up. Okay? Having said all that, let me tell you only one thing about, only one remark that I have about the book. You participated? Members of the board. And then just say one thing, and perhaps I'm wrong. Okay. This law, only one. This law is an email law. It's a personal. In Israel, for those of you who are not familiar with the Israeli legislature, legislature. Israel, we are doing fine. Personal legislation. For example, if you have a member of Knesset who needs something to be organized in terms of his judicial procedures, pass a law that this will happen in general, of course, because of the good of the people. This is the NEMA law. I'll tell you only one thing. Please tell me that I'm wrong. In Israel, there are many agencies that deal with the emergencies, with disruptions. Dozens, not to mention, for example, the local authorities, 250. But basically, we have one major agency, another one that is half major, semi-major. The major one is the Israeli IDF Homefront Command. Okay? It constitutes close to 100,000 people. Most of them are in Israel. 60,000, 60,000, okay? We'll take the number. Those are the persons, and this is the organization that is providing not only preparedness, but also management if and when there is a major disruption. That's their job. And they are preparing themselves better or worse for this capacity. Some would say that they are doing a great job, some would say that they are doing not so good job, etc. But they're there, that's the one. Okay, Pikuda Owen. But you mentioned them, was established in 1992. Okay? And the lessons of a war, we need wars to promote us different kinds of solutions. Okay, so we have the Homefront Command. General, lots of other officers. If you look very carefully in this law, I look inside the law, no mention the Homefront Command. No mention. As a matter of fact, it says there, parenthetically somewhere, it is to be clarified that this proposal does not refer to issues that have been formulated or organized in another law. This is the 1951 law. So, etc. 1951. And are in the authority of the Homefront Command. So we have a law for the preparedness of the civilian space for emergencies in Israel, and it mentions or it states that the Homefront Command is outside of the law. It's external to the law. So why is it? It's a joke. Is it a joke? Okay? Now I'll tell you why it's not a joke. Okay? Because NEMA, which is the second most important, very important agency in Israel, very important, part of the Ministry of Defense, which is so formidable in Israel. Okay? It's a huge administration with important capacities in Israel. It's not something, it's not the Ministry of Agriculture. Okay? And it is responsible both for NEMA and for the Homefront Command. The two sons of the ministry, the Homefront Command and NEMA, are not really very good brothers. And they hardly talk. When they talk, they mostly fight. So this is why, in my uncalculated case, okay, unlike the other one, which was a calculated case, is not mentioned here, and the relations or what the Homefront Command should be doing or will be doing in Israel in time of emergencies.
That's a great point.
This is a great point to stop. I have another one, but I'm not going to say it now.
This is a great point. Give the floor